Welcome to this episode of The Wolf and the Shepherd. Today we have with us Armin Mizani, the mayor of the city of Keller. Mr. Mayor, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So can you tell some of our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Armin Mizani, Mayor of Keller. It's a privilege to serve my community. I've been in Keller since 2012. I had the privilege of serving our community as city council from 2014 to 2018. Just recently got elected about 2 months ago to serve our community as mayor. And I've got two kids, two beautiful kids, Aiden and Kendall, 6 and 3. I've got a wife, my college sweetheart from freshman year. And we're proud to call Keller home.
What college did you go to?
Purdue University.
Purdue. Okay, so She went to Purdue with you?
She did. She's a smart one. So she graduated with an engineering degree. I'm the public arts guy. Okay. I went to law school afterwards, but I tell people she's the one that handles all the math in our house.
I actually wanted to go to law school, but then I didn't go to law school. And when I went to school, I thought there was going to be a pre-law major. And so they said, hey, all the pre-law people go to this room. I showed up in that room. There's a bunch of people in there. And they literally said, well, we don't have a pre-law major, but all of the pre-law people take political science.
Yeah.
So I left that day as a poli-sci major, and then I ended up getting a poli-sci degree and then not going to law school.
There you go. Yeah, there you
so
go.
I totally get that. So my co-host and I, we're not that up on local politics and how a city runs. So we kind of wanted to go through some of that with you. And so what exactly is it that a mayor does?
Sure. So the mayor, think of it as a company, for example. And particularly in Keller, we have a council mayor form of government. And so the mayor kind of acts as the chairman of a board. The city manager would act as a CEO. And so the mayor on a day-to-day basis, obviously we have a lot of meetings, whether it be with developers or businesses or maybe perhaps the chamber, nonprofit groups, things like that. But we really oversee kind of what the vision is for the city moving forward. When we have council meetings, we lead the meetings. With our council. We have a council of 6, including the mayor 7. And so we, in a sense, mayors, not only just in Keller, but mayors in the surrounding communities, we kind of help lead that vision, help guide council. But at the end of the day, we are one vote, just like our other council members. So mayor in Keller doesn't have any more authority or any more, power when it comes to voting. We have one vote, just like my fellow council members do. But we do aid in facilitating the meeting and guiding kind of what the vision for the city is moving forward.
My view of a mayor came from a lot of TV shows where they just turned up when they were opening a public building and they'd cut a ribbon, and kind of wave at people when it came to, the city's kind of local festival and stuff. But, how much balance is there between putting out fires and kind of getting to grips with the long-term goals that perhaps you have in mind when you first enter office?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. So I just got elected 2 months ago. Literally then less than probably 24 hours after I got sworn in, there was an police incident that we had here in Keller back in August.
Right, I remember that.
It became
wide right turn.
Yes,
yeah.
Uh-huh. And it became very relevant and much more than what we thought was going to be. Because just when I had gotten sworn in, there was a civil lawsuit. And so the civil lawsuit is what kind of got a lot of media attention. Now, that was the first I heard of it, was literally when I got sworn in. And so that was a fire that obviously no one had expected, including myself, to having to put out. But it comes with the role. When you sign up to serve your community as mayor, you have to take that responsibility and make sure you address it. And then no more than maybe a month or a month and a half down the road, then we had the winter storm that we all just went through here in the entire state of Texas. So these are things that you don't necessarily account for, but you know that they will come up during your term. And you as mayor and as an elected representative, you have to be ready to be able to do that, while at the same time making sure you're guiding your community and you have a vision for what it is that you're trying to do 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line. Here in Keller, there's a lot of things that we in the last, the first 2 months of my term that we had to deal with, but that doesn't mean that we stop working towards the end goal for what we're going to be doing. And so I was very clear during my campaign that I want Keller. I think Keller is a very family-friendly community. It's always been a family-friendly community. I want us to be the most family-friendly city in the entire state of Texas. That was the goal that I set forth when I was campaigning. And so with that, whether it be taxes or whether it be, establishing a mental health initiative, working with our youth, whether it be our trails in our park system or bringing quality economic development, you still have to continue doing that while putting out the fires, like you said. And it's challenging, of course, but I will tell you, in my first 2 months in office, it hasn't been as challenging as maybe you would think, because partly we've got great people around us. We've got great staff. We've got great council members. We've got great citizens. And so it makes your job easier as mayor to be able to do those long-term things and be able to still put out the fires when you have good people around you. And fortunately, that's what we have in Keller.
And I just want to say, for the benefit of our local Keller residents who are listening, unless there's going to be some heavy budget cuts in the fire department, our mayor is not actually literally putting out fires. And so just as a little bit of a follow-up for that, now the mayoral position's for 3 years, right?
Yes, sir.
Does that put pressure on you to start some things right out of the gate, which you know are going to be long-term, but it's going to be hard to squeeze in those 3 years? Because if you don't go for re-election or somebody else gets in, they might not see that as a priority. And so, what you really kind of planned in some projects has gone to waste or, doesn't get completed.
I think anytime someone steps up to run for office, you do it because there's something that you're trying to achieve. And for me, I don't really look at, well, I've only got 3 years to accomplish this or that. And frankly, in my case, because of COVID, the election was supposed to be in May, but it got postponed till December. Actually November, and then we had a runoff which got to December. So really my term it got cut short so now I have what would have been a 3-year term. It's a 2.5-year term. But I don't look at it that way. I look at it, listen, I signed up to run because there were things I wanted us to do. And I think all people that run for public office and want to serve the community, I think they think that way. And so there's no pressure in that sense, other than we are trying to move forward. And so even in spite of the incidents that we've had in the last 2 months here in Keller and throughout the state, for example, in March, we're going to be having a city council, I call it a policy summit, kind of like a workshop. But what I want our council to do is to start thinking of short-term and long-term goals for what we're going to want to do this year, next year, and the year after that. And frankly, we at Town Hall have not done that in the last 3-4 years. And so it's something that I wanted to bring back, because I think for us to really be able to be focused as a council and as a city and at Town Hall, you need to kind of start setting those type of policy goals, whether it be short or long term. And so we're doing that. We're bringing a facilitator to help us with that discussion in March this month. And I think that's going to help us try to accomplish some of the things that we're trying to do within that time frame, like you said.
So you kind of alluded to this a little bit, but was there anything specifically or even a little bit abstract that made you say here, I'm going to run for mayor?
I will tell you, I've got 2 kids. As I said earlier on, I've got a 6 and a 3-year-old. And for me, wanting to serve in this capacity was really wanting to make a positive impact, not only in their lives, but in the lives of their friends and my neighbors. And so ultimately, that's always been the motivating factor. As I mentioned earlier, I think it's a very family-friendly community. Keller is a very family-centric community. And so, but I think what's been missing is kind of being able to articulate a vision of what we're going to be 5, 10, 15 years down the line. While at the same time, keeping in mind that our habits as consumers have changed. Keller, even though we're reaching our population limit, we're projected to kind of max out at 50,000. We're a little over 45,000 now, so we're pretty much built out. But there's a lot of development surrounding Keller. So with that, there's some challenges, right? Whether it be infrastructure or those type of things. Those were kind of, for me, the motivating factors. Is I see some of the changes that are happening around us. I wanted to be able to be a part of that conversation. I'll give you an example. Consumer trends have changed. Amazon has changed the way that we shop. Grubhub or these type of delivery services, they've changed the way that people now eat. They don't maybe go out. So I think the old retail model has been disrupted. And so for us moving forward, and one of the reasons why I wanted to run is I want to be able to be a part of the conversation of reaching out and bringing out unique businesses that offer a unique experience for our residents, so that our residents aren't necessarily going to, hypothetically, a Roanoke or a Southlake. I love to have taxpayers and our residents keep their money here locally, but we got to give that incentive to do so. And so the more that we can go and recruit businesses that offer unique experience, for example, the Movie House and Eatery, or the butcher shop that opened up along 1709, or Smoking Access, where you can throw the axe and all that type of thing. That to me is a unique experience that will maintain residents and surrounding neighbors that want to come to Keller, and ultimately that will help us as taxpayers also. There are a lot of things that motivated me to want to run, but I think at the end of the day, it's kind of all predominantly focused around the fact that I've got a young family. This is where my kids are going to make their friendships and make their memories, and learn their values and those type of things. And so for me to be able to be a part of that and help my community, it was the motivating factor for wanting to run.
So I know probably some of our listeners heard what you just said, and you mentioned that 50,000 limit. And I know the Shepherd and I are both curious. What happens when we reach that 50,000 limit? Does the Shepherd need to move into the Keller boundary now, or will he be banned once we hit that limit?
I'd always encourage you to move now. I'm not going to discourage you. It's always, that was a projected goal or projected vision that Keller had. And I think if you have conversations with Keller residents, a lot of Keller residents love the unique character that Keller has to offer. We have some areas where maybe a little bit more dense. We have other areas where it's a little bit more rural. And so that 50,000 number was always kept in line with wanting to maintain that character, promoting our trails and our parks and open spaces while still being able to do a lot of things that we enjoy in maybe areas that may be populated or that may have other sort of amenities. And so I think Keller just has a good balance. And that number was always thought out to be what could provide that. But yeah, no, there's not gates are not going to go up the minute we get to 50. Right. But I think a lot of residents, and including myself, we want to make sure we do everything we can to kind of maintain within that.
You're not going to put up a sign like the national debt clock, right? That's like, $49,999. One more person, and then we're closing the roads.
I don't think that's happening, but I'm never going to say don't come and move to Keller. We'd love to have you in Keller for sure. Right. So
now, do you always had political ambitions? I mean, like obviously schools have student council, this kind of practice politics. And I've got some good friends who have kids in high school who do all the kind of political thing. That's mainly for them to try and get out of PE, I think. But, did you, even when you're in school, kind of think, what clicked that you suddenly made you think, this is something I could do?
So for me, growing up, public service has always been a big part of my life. For some people, it might be money or it might be success in whatever area it may be. But for me, what has always brought me the most satisfaction was knowing that I could help my community in some capacity. And so it just happened to be public service has kind of been that medium. What kind of led me to that growing up, so my father's Iranian. He came to the United States when he was 17, 18 years old. My mom is Puerto Rican, but my grandparents, they left Cuba right before Castro took office. And so being raised with, I think, parents that come from perhaps different ethnicities and different cultures, I've always been growing up, it's always been taught on me, and it's always been the impression that they've left on myself and my brothers to wanting to give back. And so I've always grown up, I've always had that feeling of wanting to give back to my community. Frankly, it's why, as mayor, we don't get paid. A lot of people don't know this, but when you serve as mayor and council, you don't get a stipend, you don't get paid, nothing like that. It's a volunteer gig. But so my day job, I'm an attorney. And I know sometimes we get bad raps as attorneys and things like that, but I will tell you the reason I went to law school in the first place was because of that wanting to help people. I think just like any other profession, there are people that do it the right way. There are people that do it the wrong way. I try to do things the right way. But ultimately, what led me to wanting to be a lawyer and wanting me to serve, whether it be a council or as mayor, was that wanting to help, wanting to serve. And that's always been instilled in me really at a young age. And I think that came from my background and how I was raised and really kind of the stories that my parents would teach to not only me, but my four other brothers.
Looking at Keller, and of course now you have about 2.5 years left in your term. I know this is going to seem a little tricky because you only have 2.5 years left, but let's hope you run again and that you win again and all that good stuff. Where do you see Keller in 5 years?
I see us as Texas' most family-friendly city. And that is something that we've articulated early on when we were running. It's something that we've maintained now that we're in office, and we've got a council that wants to continue to promote that. And we also have a staff that wants to make sure we obtain that title. And to me, it's literally being named Texas' most family-friendly city. It's not just a vision or a goal. It's literally, how can we quantify that? And so I think for us to get there, we have to address a lot of issues that are affecting our residents on a daily basis. For example, taxes. A lot of people, as appraisals go up, people are getting priced out of their homes. That's a problem. Mm-hmm. How can we provide tax relief for our residents so that they can stay in Keller? When I was on city council, I was fortunate to have been the one that introduced the first increase in over 30 years, the first increase to the homestead exemption. Right now, Keller, we were at 1%. Because of those efforts, right now we're at 14%. I've talked about wanting to see Keller get to 20. 20% is the max that the state of Texas will allow us. And I think when you do that, that's going to bring a lot of relief for homeowners in particular, which is going to help as far as easing the burden on taxes.
What's your struggle with getting it up to that 20%?
Every year we do it. We've done it gradual. It's been a gradual approach. And I think we just have to be careful. It's not to say that you can't get there all in one big swoop. Ultimately, you want to be taking into account what can we do to not only do the homestead, but also lower the tax rate, because they're two different, you've got the tax rate, you've got the homestead. And so one of the reasons why you haven't necessarily seen Keller go, for example, from 1% to 20% is because what else can we do, whether it be the tax rate, making sure we lower that, but also providing the amenities that a lot of our Keller residents have come to expect. And so for me, I've said that 20% is a goal, and I think we're going to get there. It may not be this year, but I'm hoping within 2 years we should get there. It's gonna be kind of a gradual approach as we've seen in Keller. So my hope is we go from 14 to 17%, and that from 17 to that 20. And once we get to that 20, that is the max that the state of Texas will allow us to do. There's a lot of things that we can also do to offset that dependency. For example, we're talking about the businesses and bringing some unique businesses offering experience. Well, when we do that, we can also start shifting the burden away from homeowners by depending more on that sales tax revenue. And so those are the type of things that I want to see us do in Keller. And I think when we start doing those type of things, that's how we become that family friendly. We got to continue to promote and push and expand our trails and our park system. That's one of the things that has really made Keller unique when you compare us to some of the surrounding communities. We've got trails and parks that are unmatched. We've got 26 miles of trails. And the long-term goal is to get that to 52 miles of trails. But we got to make sure that as development comes, and not much is going to come, but as they come, that we provide a way for that to create some connectivity between the trail system. When you talk about issues that maybe we see at the state or federal level, for example, mental health. Mental health has been discussed at the federal level, but ultimately I'm a big believer that the best way to address those type of issues is at the local level if you have strong and effective leadership. And I think we do. I think in Keller, we've got a good team of people that really want to do the right thing. When we talk about mental health and what can we do to destigmatize mental health, which frankly has become even more relevant with COVID, if we can do that in Keller and we can create an initiative, which is one of the goals that I want to see us do in the next 2 years, create an initiative that destigmatizes, but also provides us a resource for residents as far as, hey, this is where you can go to obtain some help or whatever the case may be. The more we do that, I think it's going to put Keller on the map. It's going to take Keller to that next level. So for me, it's, we got to address the issues that we always talk about on the campaign trail, taxes, right? Infrastructure, trails, bringing quality businesses, but also start addressing issues that we haven't. And I think when we do that, that's really going to put Keller on the map. And that's what excites me.
What are some of the issues we haven't addressed?
So mental health being one, right? For
Sure.
example, another, how can we engage our youth? How can we engage our senior population? So just recently, we had a council conversation where creating a committee or a board of senior residents. So when we have issues that come before the city, that's a way for them to continue to remain engaged. Same thing with our youth. We just had the police incident in Keller that happened in August. What can we do to work with our high school youth and kind of bridge some of that gap that maybe, whether it be miscommunication or misunderstanding between our police department and our youth? And so we just started an initiative. Our police chief is going to help lead that effort. It's a student forum where 20 to 25 high school students are going to be able to have meetings with our command staff to discuss issues that are relevant to policing and share ideas. And I think the more we do those type of things, which we haven't in the past, again, it's going to help us put Keller in that next step.
Yeah, I was wondering, how difficult is it to prioritize things you'd like to be seen done, or that in the background needs to be done, which the public might not always be aware of? The position of mayor is still somewhat a popularity contest when it comes to voting. Residents, if they feel that their needs aren't being addressed, it makes re-election that little bit more difficult. So do you feel that there's a need to kind of over-explain some of the things you want to get done and have to be done, and why there has to be priority before one thing can happen before another?
The way that I approach it, ultimately, listen, when you run for office, you have your core values, you have your vision, you have your ideas. And I think for the most part, should you get elected, it's a reflection on those set of ideas and those values. And it's kind of hard to be able to reach all 46,000 residents in Keller. That doesn't mean that as an elected official, you don't do what you can to engage with them and try to get their input when these items come up. So for example, whether it be in social media, I try to keep a high profile there so that people know that they can reach out to me, and whether it be questions, ideas, whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, you can't let it be a popularity contest. I'm a big believer in I'd much rather be respected than liked, because being liked can go away with the wind any minute. But if you're respected, if people know, hey, this is his position, this is what he believes in. And I think one of the ways that you can do that as a public official is when you have a vote, realize you're not going to be able to always agree with people 100% of the time. They may not agree with you, right? But if you can explain why it is that you voted how you voted, and give some sort of reasoning, people may not like it. Some people may disagree with it, but they will respect it because they'll at least understand or have a little bit more insight of why you did what you did. And that's something that I always tried doing when I was on council from 14 to 18, was always do that. And I found that whether, when I met with residents, whether it be at a meet and greet or at their door, a lot of people would say, listen, I didn't necessarily agree with how you voted on this particular issue, but I appreciated the fact that you came out and you spoke clearly on why you did that. That's always been, I found for myself, been helpful. And the same thing as mayor, that's not going to change. As mayor, you got to be who you are. And it's always been who I am as far as try to engage, try to be transparent with the whole process. And yeah, sometimes elections seem like a popularity contest, but ultimately you got to stand for your vision. And I stress to be understood as opposed to liked. And I think when you do that, things end up being better than maybe what you anticipated.
So along those kind of lines, I know it sounds contradictory saying it, but I've always thought there's too much politics in politics.
Yeah.
Are there some things you can give us some examples where on paper it should be easy to accomplish, but the red tape kind of makes it so difficult? A lot of people would cringe if they really knew how much work had to be done to get the simplest and probably the most common sense things to happen.
In government, what I found is kind of frustrating, and you see it here at the local level too. Government doesn't operate like maybe private business would. There are those red tapes that you've talked about. But I think at the end of the day, it's our responsibility, whether it be your mayor or council member, whoever you are, you got to have contingencies in place to be able to respond to a lot of the red tape. Because the reality is you're going to find that no matter what level, local, state, federal, there's going to be those type of things. I'll give you an example because there's a lot of them, but one brief example that we just had. So with the winter storm, Keller, we get our water from the city of Fort Worth. They are our supplier. One of the reasons why at one point Keller had run out of water was because of line breaks and due to the weather and things like that from our supplier. Once we were able to obtain that water, once the lines were fixed and things like that, we had, at one point, if you remember, we had a boil notice. People had to boil the water because there was concern that it could have been contaminated, things like that. For us to get that boil notice lifted, we had to take our water to a lab in Tarrant County and get it approved and all that. Now, keep in mind, we had to also wait for Fort Worth to get their water approved. Fort Worth, so Friday evening, Fort Worth got their water, their boil notice lifted. The water samples were clean. In theory, you would think that means that whoever they supply that same water to would be clean. Well, Keller couldn't just lift the notice. We had to wait for Fort Worth to do that. But not only that, we also, kind of redundant, but we had to also take our water samples and take it to another lab ourselves and make sure it got approved. It was just the little things and one of the reasons why Keller was actually able to lift their notice 24 to 48 hours sooner than even some of the surrounding cities that still get their water from the same supplier was because it was just the little things as when we got the water sample, it was late in the afternoon, the lab closed at 4 p.m. And if you couldn't get your water in time, what that meant is you'd have to wait another 12, 15 hours to be able to bring the water the following day, which kept prolonging when you could lift that water. So it was frustrating. And so one of the things that we did, first of all, kudos to our public works department because they rushed to get the water samples. But what I did in the meantime to help them buy a little bit of time was I gave a call to our county commissioner, Gary Fickus, and I said, Gary, you may not know this, but your lab closes at 4. is there anybody that you can call to make sure that they will keep their doors open for Keller to bring in their water should we bring it past 4? And he said, Mayor, no problem. Let me make a call. And sure enough, he did. Now, our public works people worked quickly to make sure we got there in time. But it was the little things like that I think if we wouldn't have done those preventive measures, we could have been another 24, 48 hours without being able to lift that boil notice. And so it's just the little things along the ways. And so ultimately, it's what I said earlier. It's you just got to have contingencies in place, knowing full well knowing that there is going to be that red tape. There is a set of protocols, and that's just the reality and the kind of the nature of the beast. But I think if you're prepared for it and you anticipate those type of things, you can react to it in a much better way.
Sure, and I can almost see journalists spinning that, right? Saying Keller didn't get their samples to the lab on time, and that's why you still have to boil your water. That's versus, right. Hey, we tried to bend heaven and earth just to make sure to get there, and yeah, they closed at 4, but we had somebody coming in and blah, blah, blah. So you can see it spun one way or
absolutely.
the other.
Yeah, and so it's the challenge. But I think if you have plans in place and contingencies, then you can kind of react to it. And so yeah, you're right. I mean, it could work one way or the other. Absolutely. Sure. Yeah.
So do you think Keller is missing anything? And if it is missing something, what is that thing that it's missing?
Man, that's a hard question because I love Keller and I love everything that Keller has to offer. I think, again, one of the reasons why I ran was I felt that we could have done a better job of articulating a vision for a long-term vision. What were we going to be 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line? You know, you go back 2-3 months ago, I felt that we were kind of lacking that vision, and maybe being able to articulate that in a way that was clear and effective and kind of set the expectations for everybody, whether it be staff, whether it be council, whether it be our residents. And so I think we're heading in the right direction for sure. I think it's been very clear. Our residents, they believe in that vision. They believe in us being a family-friendly city for all. It doesn't necessarily mean that, hey, you have to have kids in Keller to be a part of, the community. When I say family friendly, it means the empty nester. It means perhaps folks with no kids. It means people with myself that have, young kids. That's just who Keller is. We're just a family centric town. You look at the amenities that we provide, it's always been family centric. And so I think ultimately just being able to set that vision, articulate it, and really work to that end. And it's why we're having those workshops with council. We haven't done that in a long time, but I think when we do that, when we start putting pen to paper of what it is that we're trying to accomplish, ultimately that's how we get there.
And along those lines, I had a friend of ours who had been on the podcast. He actually submitted a few questions regarding activities in Keller. He said, with COVID hopefully getting on the downturn now, will there be an increase in community activities this year, like the 5K, the fun runs, Keller Crawfish Boil, live music, as opposed to last year where obviously everything was curtailed,
Yes. Yeah. I mean, obviously COVID made that very difficult with a lot of the activities that we did, but I'm happy and excited. So one of the things when I was on council, I wanted to bring a fireworks show to Keller, a 4th of July fireworks show. And I get it. I know there's always concerns with safety and things like that. And so unfortunately, years ago, we were not able to get it through. Well, I figured, hey, you know what? I just ran for office. I'm married. Let's bring it up. It's a different council. It's a different, perspective. Staff maybe have a different opinion. So we brought it back. So in fact, to answer your question, we're actually going to have a 4th of July fireworks show in Keller for the first time. Very much so, maybe like some of the surrounding communities do. And it's going to be a big show. We're going to bring in, we're in fact going to be partnering with the Keller Chamber and the Keller Farmers Market. We're going to be doing also a lighting of the lanterns event. So Keller has a great venue with the pond right behind it. We're going to light up about 3,000 lanterns and put them in the water. And then we'll also do the fireworks as a grand finale. So we're going to do that. That's an event. The Keller Summer Nights is going to be back. So in June, every Thursday, we bring in music and we do a movie at the end of the night. That's out at Keller Town Hall. And so we're going to do that. And so my hope is now that COVID seems to be, and we got to be safe, obviously, we got to continue to take preventative measures and be, cautious about what's still out there. But I think we can start moving in the right direction of getting back to what Keller's about. And so, for example, we're going to have the Connors Car Show, I know, in June as well. So a lot of the things that we used to enjoy in Keller are coming back. Maybe not right away, but we are planning for them, and I'm hoping by summer we're going to start seeing these things come back.
So are you going to get a Mayor's Choice Award at that car show?
Yes, actually
Good.
we are. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
very
No,
good.
I no joke. Yeah. We met with the representatives, and yeah, I guess, I was not aware that there was such a thing, but he did mention that. And so I'll probably bring my 6 and 3-year-old. So it'll be the Mayor's Choice Award, but it's really going to be Aiden's and Kendall's Choice Award. So I'm kind of concerned already for whoever may win that, because it'll probably be the pink car that wins.
Well, if there's a silver Pontiac convertible in there from the 60s, I'm just saying, maybe take your kids near that car and say, hey, this might be your Mayor's Choice.
That's funny. Well, my kids like lollipops and chocolate, so if you happen to just have that in the car, I'm sure they might take favor with that.
Yeah, I'll make sure that happens.
Is there a possibility of having restaurants added near the trails around Bear Creek, similar to Katy Trail in Dallas?
Yeah. And so, in fact, if there's a neighborhood, it's called, I'm forgetting, it's right behind Bear Creek Park, Bear Creek Trails or something like that. But there's a neighborhood that's already developed. And I just happen to be forgetting the name of it. But there are 2 parcels of commercial land right next to the trail, to your point. And we've been having discussions with restaurants and retailers, 2 of them, to go there. And so COVID has put a little bit of a pause on that, but we're continuing to have those conversations, and I think it's starting to look pretty favorable that hopefully within the next year and a half, you're going to see something there very similar to Katy Trail. And the same thing with the hotel that just came up, the Hampton Inn. There's a parcel there for commercial restaurant or retailer at the very end, kind of that end cap. And so we're hopeful that we'll be able to bring someone there as well. So it's going to make, I think, that whole town center, Bear Creek, our trail system, you're going to see some restaurants and retail that I think will be very unique to Keller.
Now, are there any volunteer opportunities that are open for teenagers with special needs in the community? And if so, I mean, does Keller have any partnerships that allow for any of those opportunities to take place?
With our youth, we're implementing so we've had a Keller Citizens Academy. We've had that for adults, but we also actually open it up for high school students as well. Okay, that's apart from the Chiefs Forum that we just talked about with the Keller Police and all that. Those are 2 separate programs to help engage our youth. You said special needs and things like that.
Special needs, yeah.
It's not that I'm aware of right now, but those are the type of things that, as mayor, I love to see us start looking into. Just like as we talked about the mental health initiative, I think when we start doing those type of things, whether it be mentorships or whether it be a program for special needs kids or students or families, I think the more that we can address those type of things in the future, that's going to really make our community stand apart. And frankly, it's needed, right? It's needed. There's a lot of families that kind of need that support. And so I want to be a part of that. So those are the type of conversations that when we have our workshops and when we have our town halls with residents, which I plan on doing, whether it be a meet and greet. So every month I'm going to be doing a mayor spotlight. We'll be going to a unique business in Keller every single month. And the reason we call the Mayor Spotlight is because we're going to be answering questions from our residents. We're going to be taking ideas, soliciting ideas. So I hope you can come. So March 18th is our first one. Hope you'll be able to go. And so those are the type of things that I'm looking from our residents is if you have ideas to help improve our community, share that with me, share that with your council. And I'm trying to make sure that we provide forums for that type of conversation. This month is March 18th, and then we'll do that every month, and that will also help us, aside from just soliciting ideas from residents, we'll be able to spotlight a different business each and every month, and hopefully bring more awareness to our residents that they're out there so we can support those type of establishments.
Got you. So now let's shift a little bit to what the Wolf and I called Snowmageddon. We're just now getting out of that once in a lifetime for some people, storm that happened around here where it was just 4-wheel drives driving around and everything else and everything shut down. And of course, the talk of the town, the state and everything was ERCOT. I mean, a lot of people didn't even know what that was before. And now we found out today ERCOT has fired the CEO. Well, actually fired him yesterday. And 7 of the directors of ERCOT have resigned as of last week. So given the statements made from ERCOT after all the recent power cuts because of the Snowmageddon, are you concerned that our state infrastructure won't get the funding or the upgrades it needs, so this won't happen again?
To your point, this was an event that was very unordinary, right? It was unprecedented in a sense. But if you just go back to 10 years ago, we had the snowstorm that came through the Metroplex as well, and it created some, not to this extent, but it created some damage as well. And so I think ultimately we just have to be prepared. And so whether I'm concerned, I think ultimately what would concern me is if we don't react to what just happened. What I don't want us to see is whether it be at the local level, number one, we at the local level need to make sure that we are prepared for that should it happen, whether it be next year or 10, 15, 20 years from now, but also the state level as well, right? And so what would concern me is if you don't see action coming out of this legislative session. But I think fortunately for us as residents and as constituents, I think you see the governor, for example, he, called for special hearings. You saw the State House and the State Senate. They continue to do those. And so they're asking all the questions. And I think right now they are in fact-finding mode. And I've been in conversations with our state reps. I've been in conversations with a lot of our elected officials. And I think they're looking for not only just accountability, they're going to hold people accountable, but I think they're looking for what is it that we need to do? What do we need to winterize, for example, our infrastructure to make sure that this doesn't happen again? I know that's something that the governor has talked. And so I guess I'm not as concerned so long as we're taking action. And I get the sense that we are taking action at all levels of government. I think people are asking all the right questions. And I think it's why you see that the CEO had resigned and why you see some of the board members that resigned as well. And so I'm hopeful that we're heading in the right direction, not to hopefully have this happen again. But the reality is we should be prepared for it to happen again. I think if we just sit back and assume it won't, that's going to be a problem.
Sure. And one thing we would like to actually give a little bit of a shout out, because the Keller Public Library became one of the warming stations, right? And that was obviously the Keller Public Library is not prepared to become, some kind of warming station, but we can't go without mentioning our favorite librarian, Kelly Holt, who works for the city of Keller and the public library, and was one of our early guests on the podcast, actually, and talked about the public library. So that action right there just kind of showed, hey, you got to be quick on your feet, got to think about something, and turning the library into somewhere where, hey, come get warm, maybe read a book. I mean, we do have books there, but at least get warm and use those public services.
No, absolutely. And we have great staff. Our Keller Public Library is, I think, top notch. I mean, if you look throughout the state and cities comparable to our size, I really think we run a very top notch program. But no, absolutely. You got to be able to react on your feet. And so one of the reasons why the library was actually a warming station for Keller, believe it or not, some of our city buildings, so Town Hall, for example, or the Keller Point, could not sustain continuous power to the point that we felt comfortable opening that as a shelter. The library was the only facility, aside from our police department, our fire stations, that was able to maintain that type of power. So, which is why we opened it. But I will tell you, we also had contingencies in place. So in the event that we felt that the library there were too many people and we need to create a second spot, we had conversations with our school district. I got on the phone with Dr. Rick Westfall, our superintendent, and we were, in the event that we needed to, he was willing to open the Keller High School, the gym, because they also had maintained power. And so we had contingencies in place. But fortunately enough in Keller, and also we had worked with some of the surrounding cities. I know Southlake and Colleyville, for example, had warming stations. We were sharing resources. We had encouraged residents, if you're from Southlake or Colleyville and you need to come to Keller for whatever reasons, feel free to use our station, and vice versa. But we had contingencies in place for that. But no, I'm very proud. And I think to your point, you just have to be able to act on your feet. So for example, when we had run out of clean water in Keller, well, we're not going to wait for a STAR request, even though we did put that in, to obtain water from the state or from the federal government. We're going to reach out to Samantha Springs, which is a great local resource. Joe McCombs was he actually a former council member, but when we gave him a call, he said, absolutely, how can I help? And he brought a 6,000-gallon tanker to the foots of Town Hall. We were able to distribute clean water that same day. When we realized that oh man, there's actually a greater need than what we had anticipated, and we don't have enough volunteers. Well, made a call to Northwood Church, and Northwood Church helped us in distributing that water. Same thing with Milestone. Milestone Church was able to use some of the connections they had with Nestle and some of the surrounding companies. They were able to get some cases of water to distribute water. They got in contact with the city, and so we created a system for the residents that really needed it, that had emailed and things like that. They were out there distributing water 24/7. At one point, Milestone even used the tanker that we had at Town Hall. The following day, they took it to their church and used it. When we realized that people, because of the power outages and frankly, if you recall, our grocery stores that were running low on inventory as well. It was just a crazy, snowball effect. Everything was being affected. We realized that some people were going to go hungry because they didn't have groceries for whatever reason. And so the chamber, helped us with partnering with some of the surrounding restaurants whose food was not being utilized because they were all closed. So they cooked up 1,700 meals, free meals, to distribute. I mean, that's awesome. That really, to me, Keller, I think, again, it's not one person. It wasn't, it's not me or this person or that. It was really a total team effort, a community approach pulling together. And I think it's why you saw Keller, in my opinion, it's why we stood out. When we were faced with extraordinary challenges, we really pulled together our nonprofit groups, our high school, the Keller ISD, the chamber, the churches, everybody pulled together, Samantha Springs, and we did what we could. And I think it's that type of team approach that's what's going to take Keller to that next level. And it's why, frankly, as mayor, is what excites me. Because if you take that same approach, that same mentality, and now you're addressing things like you talked about, whether it be special needs, or when you start addressing the issues that are a little bit more normal in nature, well, then they're going to not seem as difficult because you've been there and done it before with a good team. That's what excites me, and I think Keller is ready for anything.
I know from friends' posts on social media that I think everybody felt a little bit more vulnerable after the storm had passed and what they went through. I was without power for 44 hours, and it got down to about 42 degrees in the house. Yeah. But I was lucky enough I had a gas fireplace and a gas stove top, so I could at least kind of cook some warm food and keep somewhat warm. But, some of the residents weren't that lucky. And certainly the rolling blackout thing didn't work as, ERCOT told us it was going to, right, because we just didn't get any power on, whereas some people were like an hour on, an hour off. I guess that's reminded us that we are the little bit of the mercy of outside forces. So how do we reassure our residents that, I know this was supposed to be a 1 in a 100-year storm, whatever, but with Texas, we're only ever one summer away from it being a record-breaking hot summer. And again, if that puts too much strain on the grid, that, something maybe on a smaller scale, something on a larger scale doesn't happen again.
So when we have those type of emergency situations, the mayor acts as the director for our emergency plan. And so one of the things, again, I think we've got a good team around us, but we just need to be ready for it, to your point. And so along those lines, we are continuing to evaluate what we did during this time. What can we do to improve? Because I think no matter how good you think you did, there's always room for improvement at all, no matter, what facet of life. There's always room for improvement. So what can we do to improve? But also, how can we be of assistance to folks at the state and federal level? I reached out to all of our representatives, whether you were a federal U.S. senator, whether you're a state senate, whether you're a state rep. I've reached out to all of them, and what I've expressed to them is, if there's anything that you need as you formulate and start drafting your legislation to address some of the things that we saw, know that Keller's here to help. And so if I need to go and testify and be able to provide insight as to how this issue impacted Keller or communities of our size, I'd be happy to do that. If you need data, if you need to be able to quantify what it is exactly that cities like Keller, how were they impacted, we'd be happy to share that with you. And so all of our representatives at those levels who are right now addressing those type of issues, they know that they can reach out to us. But I think here at the local level, as you saw, we're not going to wait for anybody, and we're not going to wait for answers for us to react. We have to react, and that is the responsibility of local municipalities. When things like this happen, you have to be able to react. And so what that means to me is continue to evaluate what we did, what can we do to improve. And so when this does happen, because the reality is it is going to happen again. I don't know when. It may not be next year. It may not be for another 100 years, but it's at some point going to happen. You need to make sure you're ready for it. So that's what we're doing on our end.
So let's shift to your election. So you got, based off of our research, and of course our listeners know we're terrible at research, but we're gonna stand by these numbers, and you can correct me if we're wrong. But you, in the last election, you received 3,809 votes, which is approximately 59% or so of the votes in the election. Your opponent received 2,659 votes. And we talked about the population of Keller being around 45, 46, 47,000, somewhere around in there. Let's say half of them are kids. Mm-hmm. Make the math easy because I can't reach my calculator right now. So let's say there's 20,000 people and they're all registered to vote. So that's about a 25% turnout. What could the city of Keller do to increase that voter turnout? The people that come to the polls for a local election versus, everybody talks about, the president election. That's the big one, right? And, right. You almost don't want to be on the ballot for that one because everybody shows up. That's right, but those local elections where there's no president on the ballot, those off-year elections, or even not even the off year, but the random elections, right? What do you think we could do to increase voter turnout?
Yeah, so it's funny you asked that because in my election, for example, it was supposed to be in May. With the COVID, it got extended. So I was part of that November ballot. So I was on the same ticket with Trump and Biden. And so you have a lot of people that naturally they're going to come and vote for the presidential race and some of the other federal elected, positions. And so, but we were on that same ballot, which as a candidate, it actually kind of made it a little difficult because when you're in a May ballot, you can inform and meet with a lot of voters and you're the only thing on the ballot. So they'll maybe pay and want to give you the time of day to kind of listen to what you're trying to do. When you're in a federal election, I found it made it a little bit more difficult. And just even think from a practical sense, you can't reach as many people because, for example, you're going to have a lot of voters. And so whether you're trying to make a phone call or you're trying to send some sort of mail, just naturally, you can't reach all the households that are going to come out. And in this particular election that we had, November with the president, that was a high, a record turnout. So in Keller, in the mayor's race, it was actually the highest turnout naturally because of it. We had 23,000 people vote in the mayor's race in November. So in November, I forget what the percentage was, but I think it was like 47, 48%. It was a three-way race in November. And then ultimately the top two moved on to the runoff, which is when you mentioned those numbers that you talked about.
So my numbers are the runoff numbers.
Yes, that's the runoff. And actually in comparison to some of the runoff numbers, and I think because it was a mayor's race, usually at the local level, you'll see that the mayor's race will usually get more people to come to the polls. So I think we had 7,500 people that came to vote, which was actually a pretty high turnout. But you kind of wish it would be like that every single cycle, right? And frankly, you wish it would be the 23,000 number. That would be an ideal world. And so I think ultimately the way for us to do that is try to do a lot of things that we're trying to do, whether it be the town halls. I think the more that we can engage with our community, the more that we can provide insight as to what is happening and really kind of get their feedback, then I think that helps. People are going to feel more engaged. They're going to want to participate. And that's one of my goals. I would love to see that type of level of engagement in Keller. And I think that comes naturally from just being out there and making yourself accessible and transparent and letting people know that, hey, what happens in town hall is reflective of what you want to see at town hall. That's how it should be. I think part of the challenge with it, though, is for the most part, Keller is a great community too. And a lot of people in Keller live very busy lives. People have families in Keller. They go to work. They do all these type of things. And so that, I think, is also presents as a natural challenge because some people may be very happy with what you see in Keller, which could naturally lead to, well, maybe I don't need to vote this cycle because things are going well. And so I think there's that natural kind of phenomenon and that's impacted. But I love to see us continue to raise the voting numbers. And I think ultimately the best way to do that is more engagement, more participation. I think people are going to want to participate when they see that.
Now, one thing we do see in North Tarrant County is every election cycle, all of these signs on every available piece of grass, on every road. And there's so many signs that, unless you want to risk wrecking your car, that it's impossible to read them. And I'll be honest with you, I did not notice or remember your name from those signs. Yeah. But what I did remember was stuff on social media, such as Nextdoor app. I know you're on there. I contacted you through there. But that's where I first looked you up on there, not because I saw those signs. Now, I had a little bit of a question in terms, how many of those signs do you actually put out? I mean, when you were running, I know you've got to have people going out there, maybe volunteering or paid, whatever, but how many signs do you actually have to put up around Keller?
So I'm not a big believer in signs, frankly, because signs don't vote. People do. But the nature of politics, you kind of have to have signs just as a visibility, and I get it. So we do get we do purchase signs. I'm trying to think, as far as the large signs, I think I had the 4x4 signs. I think I had like 15 4x4 signs. I know from prior campaigns, people would tell me, oh man, you only have 15. We had 40 of the large signs. It's just, I don't believe signs vote. I think what you do outside of that, for example, like you said, the social media and just your engagement, I think ultimately that's what's going to reach a voter. On the small yard signs, though, we actually did order quite a few, but frankly, it was because and we were fortunate, a lot of people were just requesting it. And, someone's going to request a small yard sign. I'm not going to tell them, no, you can't have it because we ran out. We're going to, I'm going to order it. And so I'm trying to think back at one point. So when I ran for city council the first time, I just ordered 100 yard signs, small yard signs, and that was it. Now, at that point, I moved, here. I didn't really know many people. And so we didn't feel the need to order. I think this cycle, I want to say we had purchased in total about 600, 700 of the small yard signs. And we had them all out there. Some of them disappeared. I don't know what happened to them. Some disappeared, but they were out there. And I try to stay away from, when I had people to help with a campaign and things like that, we would put them in people's yards. I mean, it was a request. Hey, we like to put your yard sign type of thing. I don't like putting yard signs out in the middle of nowhere. If it's a public right of way, I always try to stay away from those. The larger ones, you saw them more out in the public, but the small ones, we always usually had them in people's yards. And so I'm not a big believer in signs. I don't think signs vote. People do. It's what you do outside of that. If you run a campaign based on signs, I think chances are you're probably going to lose. It doesn't impact a voter.
Yeah.
But it's kind of the nature of the beast. You kind of have to make that purchase. I've always just tried to limit what I did with that.
Yeah. Now we're pretty well behaved in Keller, but I've got some friends who live out in West Texas, and they say when those signs come up, after 6 o'clock at night, they're just used for target practice. I mean, they're driving by in the cars.
You'd be surprised.
Shooting at them,
I drive by a sign. I was like, I don't think I had that sign there. I don't think it was like that. Someone did something. And, the reality is it's kind of sad, but you kind of come to expect it. Signs are going to disappear. Things are going to happen to them. And as a candidate, you can't let it affect you. If you're worried about, do I have the right sign placement here? You're probably not worrying about the right thing.
Right. Oh. And one last thing, actually, along those lines, I know I mentioned the Nextdoor app. I posted on there a couple of weeks ago that, we were going to have you here on the show, and I asked for any questions they might have for you, and we've put in some of the questions in here. But a lot of the questions wanted to know more about you. I think in Keller, we're very lucky in that people value character over a lot of achievement stuff, and they want to know who a person is. And actually, a question which was asked quite a number of times was that, with you being a personal injury attorney in Grapevine with your own law firm, there are questions like, ask him how he got started with that.
Yeah. Again, for me, wanting to go to law school was because I viewed it as a way of wanting to help people. Now, you can help people in many different professions. I just happen to have chosen law. And I think for me, I've always enjoyed interacting with people. Growing up, that was always the thing I enjoyed. I've always enjoyed negotiating. I think that's something I took from my dad. And so to some extent, from a personal injury perspective, why I got into personal injury, there's a lot of negotiation involved with the insurance companies. I kind of view it as a David versus Goliath type of thing, because insurance companies, they're real quick to take your premiums, But the minute that someone truly gets hurt or is truly in an accident and needs some assistance, all of a sudden they start pointing the finger, you should go somewhere else, and they don't want to pay. And so I take joy in helping people in that end, and especially folks who are truly hurt, and that's what I try to focus my practice on, is people that really need help. And whether it be a veteran that's suffering from PTSD and gotten a 18-wheeler accident, and now the insurance company is saying, well, that's a pre-existing condition, we're not going to pay. I love having that type of challenge, and it's why I enjoy being a personal injury attorney. And what led me to that is, frankly, I think it's that interest in wanting to do those type of things, whether it be negotiating and representing people, but also it's just, I think, opportunity. When opportunity knocks, you kind of take it. And so when I graduated law school, I went to undergrad at Purdue University, met my wife there. I knew I was going to go to law school. In fact, I wanted to come to law school to Texas, but my wife took a job. At the time, she was my girlfriend, took a job in Wisconsin. So like any smart man, if she's going to take a job in Wisconsin, you got to be pretty close by. So that whole Texas plan, it was put on the back burner, and I went to law school in Michigan State, which was close enough for me to visit, and she can visit every other weekend. Once I graduated, we knew that we wanted to come to Texas. I have family that lives in San Antonio, and so we've always wanted to come here. It was great opportunities, things like that. So I applied everywhere. I applied everywhere in the state, and there was a firm out of Dallas that took me at the time. And that's kind of how we landed in the Metroplex. And Keller, it just so happened to be kind of the midway point of where my wife was able to transfer to and where I ended up working with. And that's how we landed in Keller. And ever since, we never left. Since then, I've started a practice of my own. I've been on my own now for, I want to say 6 years, I think. And we've got our practice in Grapevine. And so I enjoy what I do. Like I said earlier, I know there's some people that maybe do things the right way and some people that do things the wrong way. And unfortunately, the few that do it the wrong way kind of put a cloud over the whole profession. And that's unfortunate. But I try to be one of those people that does it the right way. If you call, I'm going to answer your phone. And for me, I don't take every single case that comes through the door because, frankly, we need to give that one-on-one type of attention to everybody that comes through.
Yeah, and that's perfectly alluding to my next question for you. Did you feel like that connotation behind lawyers might have hurt you in a election for mayor, say in a small town like Keller versus, your senators and representatives? A lot of them are typically attorneys. But maybe at the local level, they're like, I don't know if we really need another attorney in a political office because it's all full of lawyers anyway, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's just a reality. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I came across doors where people say, yeah, aren't you a personal injury lawyer? Or and sometimes you get people unfortunately will say, or you're just an ambulance chaser or something like that. And the reality is I kind of explain it how I did. I tell them the truth. Listen, I am a lawyer. I do personal injury, and here's why I do personal injury. And I think for the most part, when I explain what it is that we actually do, again, I think it's just the few people that do it the wrong way that put a bad cloud on the whole profession. But I think when you explain what it is that you actually do and who you represent and I think people understand it. But the reality is, in politics, people will use everything they can against you. Yeah, I remember running for city council in the first place. That was one hot button issue. You'd have 2 or 3 people that were really vocal that would use that against you for whatever reason. Same thing happened when I was running for mayor. At the end of the day, listen, it's your profession, and you got to be able to explain it, and you got to be able to ultimately take pride in what you do. And I take pride. I don't have any qualms about what I do, and I'm very proud of what I do, and you can't hide behind it. So, and I think the more that you can stress that, people, again, they'll probably maybe respect it, because sure enough, I'm sure there's a lot of people in Keller who may be personal injury attorneys, and I think people can kind of relate to it.
All right. So if we were to show up at your law firm, you do not have an aquarium in there with sharks swimming around?
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah, we don't have an aquarium. Not yet. No, no, we don't.
Well, if we do have anybody that wants to sponsor our podcast that provides saltwater aquariums with sharks, we will try to get them in touch with you and get you all set up.
I appreciate it.
Right. Now, before the shepherd asks you his last set of questions, and I'll warn you now, they are trivia questions.
Okay.
And you owe us $10 for each one you get wrong, which I'm pretty sure is legally binding. But
I owe you guys $10 for
each one you get wrong.
Man.
But
Oh, but one thing we didn't discuss, what if he gets them right? Do we have to pay him
nothing.
$10?
He just comes off as a brainiac if he gets them right.
Oh, man.
Yeah, but the problem is he's a lawyer, so maybe he's going to take this as some kind of contract and hold us to something.
Well, I don't know. We don't have any money, though.
Yeah, we don't have any money. So
we just want to let you know. So the last question
he can get 33% of nothing.
He can, that's true.
That's right.
So the last question I wanted to ask you was, do you have any further political ambitions beyond mayor of Keller? Are you thinking later on maybe taking it a step further, or do you think this will get it out of your system as such?
I've always so one of the things I've always disliked is when people get asked that question, and naturally I get it. I'm a young guy. I've served as a council. I'm a mayor, and so I've had that question before. You can't really think about it because you don't have time to think about those type of things. And I will tell you, I think I'm a big believer in things happening for a reason. So I served on council, but I ran for state rep after that, and I lost. Things happen for a reason. I think there's always a plan that God may have for you, and ultimately. What I had realized the last year and a half, 2 years that I wasn't in office was how much I really cared about our community and how much I thought there was still a lot of things that still need to be accomplished in our community, which is what prompted me to run for mayor. I think along the way, you also realize kind of where you're at in your life. I've got a 6 and a 3-year-old. For example, my son has baseball practice Mondays and Wednesdays. As mayor, I have the ability to go to his baseball practice, whereas if maybe I were in Austin or somewhere else, I wouldn't be able to do those type of things. And so I can very sincerely tell you, I want to be mayor for Keller for a long time, especially kind of where I am in life. Who's to say 15, 20 years from now where you'll be? Because frankly, I don't know where I'll be. Maybe I'll, like to your point, maybe you'll say I'm done. I've done what I need to accomplish. But I've always enjoyed serving. And ultimately, I want to be able to serve my community the best way I can. And the way that I see that, at least for a while, as my kids go through school and go through high school, things like that, I see that here locally as mayor. I wouldn't want to have any other seat. I think being able to have a stake and be a part of the conversation of who we are as a community and what we do 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, and being able to impact my kids' life and maybe their friends' life and our neighbors, it's a pretty awesome feeling, and I'm enjoying it. I know it's only been 2 months, but I'd love to be able to be mayor for a long time.
So here comes the fun part. So I don't know how much of our podcast you've listened to, but we have a segment rather called Stump the Shepherd. And so the wolf will ask me all these questions, and I usually never get them right. So he's allowing me to have this segment called Stump the Mayor.
Okay.
So we're going to have some trivia questions here.
I'm kind of scared on this one, yeah.
All right, so question number 1. And by the way, over there, Wolf, keep track because it's $10 every time.
Do I get to phone a friend or something?
No.
No.
50-50?
Yeah, no Googling,
okay.
No smartphone
All
usage, right. None of this. But yeah, it was on the first page of Google. So
this is going to be bad. This is bad.
Okay.
All
right, here we go. So question number 1. Mm-hmm. Before Keller was called Keller, what was it called?
Oh, I know that one. Ethel.
Dang it.
All right, well.
Good. All right.
Come on.
At least I got one. I was nervous I wasn't going to get any of them.
Yeah, he got the first one. Question number 2. Where did Keller get its name?
John C. Keller, who's a foreman. Now you guys are going to think I had these questions before.
I know.
For the record, I did not have these questions. He did not have it.
This is why I always write the stump the questions.
John C.
Because
Keller.
I always ask the ones which nobody ever gets correct.
Well, I guess that's why you should have been in charge of this part. Why did you put me in charge
we
of
know
this?
now.
Yeah.
We know now.
Okay.
He was a foreman for a railroad here. So
yes, he was. Yeah, John C. Keller, a railroad foreman. Yeah. Question number 3. So literally, the shepherd is 0 for 2 right now.
Yeah. What is Keller in Mandarin?
No. All right. Question number 3. How big was Keller when it was first started?
Ooh.
And see, this is typically what the wolf does to me because the question needs to be answered in acres.
In acres?
Yeah, so the odds of you getting this right are slim to none.
When it started?
Yeah.
So if I'm not mistaken, I think Keller now, we go to 50 miles from, how do you say that? Like corner to...
Of course, when it first started, way back in the 1800s, what was that initial plot of land?
You want me to guess?
Yeah.
I guess.
Well,
At this
What
point-
error margin are we going to give him? Plus or
Yeah, do I
minus
this is tough.
quarter of an acre.
So I know we're pretty.
yeah, I like that. A quarter of an acre. That's
Plus or minus 20
we're pretty
feet.
big now. I'm gonna go. Give me 10 acres.
40 acres.
Ooh.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right. I'm 1 for 3
That's
so far.
Chick-fil-A paid for.
Yeah, there you go. All right, there's $10. All right, last question. What is the greatest Star Wars movie ever made?
Oh my gosh, I have not. Okay, I'm gonna lose a lot of votes right now.
Uh-oh.
I've never watched the Star Wars.
Oh
movie.
my God.
Oh.
All right,
This is sad.
so Wolf, you are no longer in charge of getting our guests if you did not, preface this with watching Star Wars.
I take it you guys are big Star Wars.
I've got
fans.
an uneasy feeling in the force that half of our listeners have just switched off.
I know. I'm so glad. I'm so glad that was the last question. Because otherwise, everybody's going to turn it off. So it's funny. So I have 4 brothers. I'm the oldest of 5, and my youngest brother is a huge Star Wars fan. So when they come and visit, now he's getting my son into it. So really, I should be able to give, but I can't because I know that they've watched it when they come home and visit. They watch it. I know there was a Disney Plus. There was a show that I guess a lot of people liked.
The Mandalorian.
Yes,
Yeah.
I probably,
And you have Baby Yoda looking at you right behind
And
you.
Darth Vader.
Oh, I do.
And Chewbacca.
Yeah, you know
And
what? There was a
C-3PO.
winter storm that we had to take care of in Keller. I didn't have time. I'll use that, but no, I'm going to watch one.
All right.
At least one.
Well, Mr. Mayor was so glad to have you and everything. Please let everybody know how they can get in touch with you, how they can find you on social media and all that good stuff before we close.
Empire Strikes Back, is that one?
Yes.
Okay,
So
I'm gonna
here
go
we
with
go.
one.
Empire
Ooh.
Strikes Back.
Sounded
is
like
correct.
a guess. No, Rogue One is the best one ever.
No, Empire is. But we're going to do a later podcast on
Okay.
that. Empire
Yeah.
still is the best one.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
nice
you have me
save. But,
thinking,
man.
man.
Typical lawyer
Yeah.
and politician, right?
Yeah.
He was able to figure out the right answer even though he
Yeah.
hadn't seen
I
it.
had to think of it.
Yeah.
I was not going to leave without naming
Yeah.
one. The people can find me on Facebook and on Twitter. If you go to the handle Armin Mizani TX, so Armin Mizani TX, I'm on Facebook and Twitter. Facebook, I really try to stay engaged there as much as I can. I find that to be a way that's kind of easier for folks to reach out. So if people have questions, they can message me there. They can also email me, amizani at City of Keller. So AMIZANI at cityofkeller.com. That's my email address. But social media is probably the best way to reach me if you're there, to reach me and also to get updates. I try to put updates there, whether it be town halls, meet and greets, things like that. I try to do that on social media. So, yeah.
Great. Well, once again, thanks for joining us, and thank you for listening to this episode of The Wolf and the Shepherd, and we will catch you on the next one.